I'm really pleased that we're joined today by the Honorable Claudiana, Minister of Education of the Gambia, Honorable David Sengeh, Minister of Basic and Higher Education in Sierra Leone, and Dr. Patrick Awuah, founder and president of Ashesi University in Accra, Ghana. I wanted to talk to you because of all the sectors, education has probably been the most disrupted because of the pandemic. And we can talk about all the negative consequences of kids being out of school and so on, but what I wanted to ask is whether you don't think that there might also be in this situation an opportunity to reevaluate how students have been taught traditionally. For example, the use of technology, even though there are still limits on access to technology, but for upskilling, teacher training would be one thing that I imagine technology might be used for to enrich the learning in class. The fact that we've had to work with much more flexible school schedules, smaller class sizes. So I'm just wondering whether there aren't some benefits to be gained from some of these things that have had to be done because of the current situation. And perhaps, Minister, you might reflect on that first.
Good. You're absolutely right, David. COVID has affected the entire world, and it has seriously disrupted education the world over, especially the traditional type of schooling that we all know so very well, where most of us, particularly in developing countries, because of lack of access to a lot of innovative ideas or innovative opportunities, we had only thought, or a lot of people only thought, that learning could take place in the classroom, with the teacher standing there and the students all seated in rows or in groups and listening to the teacher talk, and that's the only way they could learn. But COVID has come to teach us that we can really continue learning and providing education in a different way. For instance, for my ministry, the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education, the Gambia, we have the current education policy of 2016-2030 that we are working on, the policy we are implementing now. And when that policy was developed, we had in it that we will use IT in education to provide learning. But little did we know that even before we were ready to do so, something that is called COVID would push us to do it and take it up more quickly than we ever thought.
Can you tell us maybe exactly how you're using IT in education? I mean, what did you anticipate? How is it going to be used?
We're going to use technology to reach out to the children. And we're going to be using the TV and the radio to do distant learning.
So these remote learning opportunities, remote learning platforms were established. Students were encouraged to engage with them. Did they engage with them? Do you know that learning actually happened during this time? And what of all of these practices that were put in place during the pandemic can be institutionalized? What do they have? Can they add value to education? Maybe Dr. Sengeh,
sure,
about the Sierra Leone experience.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, and thank you, Patrick. Good to see you. Thank you, Michael. I think, one evidence for learning, you clearly know that there's inequalities that exist, particularly now during COVID, and the people who are wealthy are the ones who will be exposed to more resources for remote learning. And so we had a hybrid of solutions. We had online learning that we made freely available. We had some TV learning, we had radio learning, and then we had, paper as well as technology, and then we supplied materials. But the people who have TV, national TV is really just in the urban areas, in the cities. So if you're not in the city and if you don't own a TV, you're not going to learn as much. radio, even radio that we think is everywhere, is also not everywhere. There are many communities in riverine areas where there was no radio in the beginning. Only a few people had access to radio stations because the education radio, which the teaching program all day, was not fully available. And so we had to use community radios. And even when we have to give physical paper material for distance learning, we still had to travel. It was rainy seasons and hard to reach areas. So not everybody can learn, not everybody will learn, and just based on the technology and the medium. But we know that learning was taking place because we reopened schools 3 months later. Or 4 months later for partially for exam candidates who came to school for 5 weeks, and we had about 400,000 people take exams. And while the pass rates went down, it was because we increased the number of people who registered, but the number of people who were passing actually went up. And for certain subjects, for the science subjects, we saw that the pass rates in those subjects also increased. And this is for senior secondary school, and we saw a lot more kids in primary school as well transition into junior secondary school. So we know that learning was happening. Some of that learning could be just from home. We know that the home and the household does matter as well, and the support you get for remote learning. And we have continued to expand on the radio teaching program even now that all schools are back to full running. Mm-hmm. But we have to actively monitor learning and learning outcomes, and that's what we're doing.
So on the question of some of the necessary elements that were implemented during the pandemic, are there parts of that that can be used to enhance learning and education going forward?
The remote learning and the radio, like I mentioned to you, we have continued radio teaching program. In fact, for ECD, we've now mainstreamed it. So at 10 a.m. every day, there's a reading on the radio, and we're going to provide radio to all of our ECD centers. And I think we'll have complementary reading programs because we know the value of reading, so to complement the physical materials that we'll give, and we will continue to build new transmission and transmitters so that every place can have reading.
Patrick, Ashesi is modeling a new approach to tertiary education, at least, and I think you certainly have your eyes on the pipeline through school and how students can be better prepared. One of the challenges predating the pandemic has been this notion of educating students for unemployment, the mismatch between curricula and the available economic opportunities. That, I imagine, is going to be even more crucial now. In the first instance, because economies have suffered severely, but secondly, because I think it seems that the pandemic will have accelerated the integration of technology across all sectors, and particularly across the economy. And so the need for a different kind of education would seem to be more urgent than ever before. And I'm just wondering to what extent Ashesi and you personally have begun to anticipate that.
Well, it's really important, I think, that first children understand what they need to know in order to pursue certain careers. And I think that all schools should make a particular effort to bring people from industry into the classroom so that students have an idea, first of all, of what careers are available. So every school should have a career placement function or career counseling function. And as part of that, bring people to demonstrate what careers are available. Students also need to understand what skills they need in order to pursue certain. So a student might, for example, say, I want to be a doctor, but they don't really know that, well, you need to know math and you need to know science and so on. And if they knew that, then that'd be highly motivating to them to study a certain way. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that the curriculum needs to be as students progress through school, they should become critical thinkers. They need to be people who are able to connect the dots between fields. And so broad learning is important, contextual learning is important. They need to be able to do experiments using materials around them, rather than some experiment that they don't have the equipment in school to actually do themselves, and so they don't really learn the material as well as they should. Those are some of the things that schools should be doing to prepare the kids to come into a place like Ashesi. And then, of course, numeracy and reading and writing skills, communication skills are incredibly important.
Well, that's all very helpful. So, but the fact of the matter is that most students are probably not going to get into Ashesi or any other college. And so we'll be leaving school potentially with significant learning deficits given the current situation, which one can imagine has the potential to contribute to significant dissatisfaction, political disruption, a sense that their prospects have been diminished. Their quality of life is diminished at a time when most young people world over, because of the easy access to social media, have higher expectations. So I want to ask the politicians first. Minister Claudiana, is this something that is being considered? The fact that you have so many young people now with worse prospects than they had before the pandemic.
We've started talking about TVET, but I think the time has come for us not to only talk about it, but to take it up seriously. Hence the need for us to be able to review and revise our curriculum, to be able to adjust to the new normal. Times have changed, and we have to change with the times.
Yeah.
So the curriculum has to be reviewed, be revised, to be able to provide the necessary skills, knowledge, attitude, competences for the young people to be able to fit in themselves into society and not sit and wait for something that is going to drive them into frustration.
Yeah, Patrick, Ashesi focuses on, in addition to hard skills, focuses on values of ethical leadership and community service, which are fine and sterling values, and one would imagine would make more engaged and for want of a better word, responsible citizens. Do you think that will help serve countries like Ghana in the long term in terms of young people's political participation?
Absolutely, Michael. I think that the work that we've done in sort of getting students to have a deep sense of ethics and to have a sense of community engagement and citizenship is really important. So, and I was going to say that the community service requirement does a couple of things for students, right? The first, of course, is that they develop a deeper sense of empathy. Going out and seeing real problems and tackling those problems really builds empathy. The second thing is that they develop a sense of agency and a confidence that comes from having solved a real problem. So in a way, it is sort of the laboratory for the humanities and social sciences. It's one thing to be talking about things in class and studying cases in class. And it's another thing to go out and see it for yourself. And not only that, but actually solve the problem and see the change that it makes in people's lives. And I think that kind of confidence and empathy that's built is invaluable in developing, citizen leaders for our society.
So, Minister Sengeh, I'm sure that your country, like most, is very focused on economic recovery. And I'm sure that in cabinet you sit around discussing strategies for economic recovery. My question is, how are you working to ensure that education is part of economic recovery?
I think The one thing I can tell you about Sierra Leone is it's one of the first countries that has expanded its education budget even during COVID. We have gone from 21% last year to we are now 22% of our budget this year for the 2021 budget. And we're looking and we're actively asking governments to expand on just resourcing that we have. So for me, really is how do I advocate for more girls' education? And also with our multi-donor trust fund, during this period, we also just launched a $50 million World Bank donor support and a $16 million multi-donor trust fund with FCDO, with Irish Aid, with the EU, and the World Bank, and then the GPE COVID response. And the multi-donor trust fund really came together because we have to consolidate resources and make sure that the activities that we're focused on and are prioritizing do not overlap with each other and do not undermine. So Sierra Leone, luckily, because education is our flagship program, we have not contracted our budget, even with the contraction of the economy. Instead, we have expanded it. And this is because we believe that education is our path to national development. And our national development plan is titled Education for Development. And we very much believe that this is our way of transformation.
So Minister
Claudiana, if I may add to that, Michael.
Yeah, Patrick, go ahead.
I would say that, in Ghana, the schools have a school feeding program. It's a social intervention. And to the extent that food is being purchased from local suppliers and farmers, the educational system getting back online is a really important economic engine for even the agricultural sector. The second thing is that, in terms of employment within the public sector, teachers tend to be the largest sort of group of employees within the government sector. And so, paying those salaries and paying them on time, that sort of thing has a really important economic multiplier. And so when the educational system comes back online, just by getting restarted, that is going to have an impact on the economy.
Right, but Minister Claudiana, building on what Patrick has just said, the point is that education is really at the center of human development. Implies that all your collaborating sectoral ministers in agriculture and many other spheres need to have some appreciation of the fact that education is being prioritized over their sectors at some, in many cases. And so I'm wondering how that works out for you in cabinet, whether you find close collaboration with your sectoral colleagues, whether there is a clear understanding that education is the driver of economic development at the end of the day.
Absolutely, Michael. Education is one of the areas of our human capital development. And like you said, it's education, it's health, it's agriculture, it's youth and sports. I could say that the Minister of Finance is a very good supporter. And not only him, but even the President of the country realizes that education, and particularly basic and secondary education, is very important for our human development and also for achievements of our national development plan. So I think it's important, and that's exactly what I have been doing since I left Harvard some years back. Remember, during our discussions at Harvard, I still make reference to them, that the finance minister should be a best friend.
Yes.
I have really tried to befriend the finance minister, and I'm pleased to say that for 2021 budget, education budget has been increased. In fact, everybody is talking about it, saying basic and secondary education has taken a greater share of the national budget. And we should also look out to how do we reach out and get our partners more involved and more engaged and become more supportive in what we're doing. For instance, the World Bank, as was mentioned by my colleague there, the Global Partnership for Education, the GPE, UNICEF, and all other in-country partners as well as international partners, we have tried to reach out to them so that we could get the necessary support, all the support. Education is expensive, it's not cheap. And as a developing country, it is a burden. Perhaps that's not the right word to use, but it is a huge responsibility on our governments to provide the much needed education for the ever increasing number of children that we have in our schools right now, and to be able to keep up with all the demands of the 21st century for a quality education.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think worldwide, certainly family support, parents, mothers and fathers, a large part of the public are always very strongly supportive of education, which also makes it a potentially a political flashpoint when they're not happy with the education. But David, I wanted to ask you, through this whole malaise of the pandemic that is far from done yet, is there something that you as a minister, as a leader, have learned that you think is going to be of value to you going forward?
I think it's just collaboration and cross-collaboration and cross-cutting, because one of the things that I know has been very, very useful for us and for me is how we collaborate to have effective and efficient impact on quality education. And it's obvious for just changing policies, like what's an example? Changing policies around pregnant girls going to school. It's not just education, it is the religious groups, it is civil society, it is parliament, it is everybody who's involved. The conduct of the WAEC exams, I think Honorable Cole can talk about that, the implication that and what we went through to ensure that WAEC, which is the West African examination body, coordinates with all of our 5 countries involved, give us dates, ensure that our children prepare in that process and that the results come out and that they can transition. So it's collaboration locally at the root level, but also in the region, in the sub-region. I don't think any of our WAEC countries, our West African councils, member countries, would have been able to transition all of our children across the different levels. And it is important because if we did not, in Sierra Leone, for the senior secondary school, for the WAS, we had 150,000 candidates who we gave a chance to transition. If those ones did not transition and have options for technical and higher education and TVET and other professional life, it would have been increased disaster. So it's the collaboration really that will stay.
Yeah, that's very useful. How about you, Claudiana?
Well, definitely collaboration and partnership. And we were able to see that vividly displayed during the closure of schools. Government contributed towards the distant learning that we provided for our students, because we are a small country, but we have a proliferation of community radios across the country. Apart from the national radio and the national TV, we have other private television stations, and we have over 33 community radio stations. And we engage all of them to be able to air out the lessons that we had provided for the children. And we had to pay a lot of money, millions of dollars. But since COVID was never in our 2020 budget, I don't think any country had budgeted for COVID. Perhaps some other countries had emergency funds, but the Gambia, we didn't have any. Before even the government could release any funds to be able to take care of the distant learning, it was our partners who came on first. They came on board first. We had our partners like UNICEF, in-country partner, the World Food Program, another in-country partner, coming on board first, providing funds for us to start before we could have a no objection from the World Bank, and before we could even have COVID response funds coming from the GPE. So collaboration is very helpful, it's very useful, and I think it's something that we want to really strengthen and to build on.
So thank you all very much. It's good to see you, and I hope that you stay well and safe.